All right, welcome back from break. This is class 5, part 2, brushwork, painting the sky and trees. And I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about just some ways to simplify and think about trees. And we're going to be talking about, well, let me move over to the palette here. We're going to be talking about how do we take an image like this that seems to have a whole lot of different information, a lot of little tiny shapes. How do we simplify it? And how do we begin to think about trees? You would think in a class, literally called How to Paint Trees, that I would go through and say, here's how you paint a pine tree. Here's how you paint an oak tree. Here's how you paint a palm tree, right? But I don't believe in that. I don't believe in saying this is how we do one thing or the other, because what happens is it becomes a formula and a stamp tool. I would rather teach you how to look at those things, because there's maybe thousands and thousands of different types of trees, bushes, all the different things. When I say how to paint clouds, right? I mean, who knows what season, what time of day? I mean, we could spend a year learning about all the different types of clouds, the different formations, what they do. What I would rather do is teach you how to look at the tree, look at the clouds, look at the structure of the thing, analyze it for yourself, and figure it out. So let me go ahead and wipe. What I did was I just put a little bit of Indian yellow on here. I'm actually going to wipe it down a little bit. And I just put the Indian yellow on there during the break so that it begins to stain the surface a little bit. I know that the transparent colors literally work like a stain, meaning that it's harder to wipe them away. The more opaque colors, I can wipe them away. What I'm going to do is something called what I call a wipe away method, or a subtractive way of painting. And this is really helpful when I'm just painting, when I'm painting various types of trees or different structures that I don't know the names of. I literally don't know, is this a poplar? Is this an oak? Is this a pine? Whatever it is. It's a whole bunch of different types of trees in this scene, right? With a whole lot of different shapes. But we, instinctively know that's a tree, 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 right? So can you imagine if I said, okay, here's how we paint oak trees. Here's how we paint poplar trees. Here's how we, you know what I mean? That's not really useful. So what I would rather show you is how do we analyze what we're looking at? So I've got this odd palette. It's Indian yellow. This is a different color than I've ever used. This is transparent Mars brown, which I believe, let me look at the code. Yeah, I believe it's very similar to the transparent earth red.
Okay.
It probably has.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very similar.
Okay, and then
Go ahead.
you're using the phthalo green, you said.
Yeah, and I've got phthalo green beside it here. So
okay, that's what I thought.
That and bring that down below.
And what are all those odd ones on the other side?
During break, we had a weird discussion about just different colors. These are the two greens. This is sap green. This is that Italian green ochre, which I don't know if I'll do anything with it. And then we have raw umber and burnt umber here.
Okay.
Which really colors I use very much. I can see a lot of warmth when I look towards the tops of these. So maybe I will see what happens. I mix a little bit of that. Maybe with some, because it's a very opaque color, I'll maybe mix some Indian yellow in there. I have not cleaned my brush, so it's a very contaminated brush, but it's just got, I don't know, I mean, it's already a really pretty color.
There's a lot of red in it.
A lot of red, yeah. So all I'm going to do is using these different shades that I just mixed up here, I'm going to recreate basically the loose form. And what happens a lot of times when people start painting trees is they begin to see the leaves, they begin to see the detail. And I'm going to urge you to look for, like, squinting your eyes. So I'm going to hold this up, right? And there's a lot of delicate edges, a lot of transitions, information going on. When I hold it away, now everybody squint their eyes at it. And can you guys see kind of the bigger, rougher shapes?
Yes.
That is what we're going to do. That's how we're going to start our painting. For those of you who are really detail oriented, I know that that's like a heartache. That's like, but I don't, I want to do this. I want all the detail. But for those of you taking notes and those of you who are having a hard time with it, write this down. The detail will come.
Detail will come.
The detail will come.
Detail, just say detail will come.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Wrote down, Michael says the detail will come.
Yeah, we're going to start off big shapes to small shapes. Very glary. Let's see. So yeah, these colors seem very transparent. I might want to get some more opacity in there, meaning some darker darks. But I'm just looking for very much the loose, kind of random shapes in there. I'm looking for almost like the silhouette, like the dark against the light. Here's some of that phthalo green mixed in with the brown. Very curious what's going to happen here. But I figured that just like if we mix the phthalo green with a quinacridone red, I figured that the brown is going to do a lot of the same, make it very dark.
It made a nice dark.
Does make a nice dark.
And Michael, you don't have any medium mixed in those paints, right?
I do not. No, no
Okay.
medium.
All right, pure.
I don't want it to be too slippery or slimy.
It's good.
It's already pretty slippery and slimy just from the oils and the paints.
Yeah.
I'm just very much staying abstract, and I'm sure you guys are so tired of me saying that, abstract this, abstract that, but I'm really not thinking things. I'm just thinking those big silhouetted shapes. All right, so I got quite a bit of paint on there. I'm just going to grab a big brush, and I'm just going to smush this out a little bit and make sure it doesn't have any paint thinner on it. So I took what was already a very loose, get some hairs in there, I'll get those out, so I'm not fighting them all day. I took what was already a very loose, soft-edged, nondescript.
The white way.
Oh, with a brush. And then it's wet on wet.
I already kind of like it. I don't know why this is so glary. See if I can move it and get the glare off. There we go. That's better, right?
Yes, that's better.
So again, if I go sideways with it, You'll see all that glare. That's because my lights are from up above. So by simply coming, that's one thing that makes teaching a little bit tough, is because it's hard to paint only in vertical strokes versus horizontal. But do you guys see still kind of loosely again if you squint your eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we see, I see it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I mean, I don't want to say, beautiful, but there's a beauty in it,
Yes.
right?
It
Yes.
is beautiful.
So what I can do is I can come back in if I want, if I'm like, okay, some areas I don't quite have as dark maybe as I want. Maybe I'll just add a little more paint, but there's quite a bit of paint on there. In fact, I think I'm having a hard time getting it to stick. So I'm gonna kind of keep it where it is.
I like the way the phthalo green darkened the bottom.
And I'm gonna go ahead and grab a softer brush real quick, because that's just a house brush. And so these house brushes inevitably have soft and hard bristles mixed in there. Plus, I have no idea if I washed it properly, or maybe even been used to paint this studio. I have no idea. So I'm just gonna grab a nice soft fan brush, and I'm just gonna kind of get rid of some of the streaks a little bit, hopefully. There we go. And you can see it's kind of dark, right? Like, oh man, I thought this was going to be a bright, lovely, inviting painting. But by having that layer of Indian yellow that sat there even for just a couple minutes, I'm not going to say I know what's going to happen, but I'm pretty positive that stained the canvas and almost created like a protective layer against these next colors. Just a touch. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to continue that idea. I'm going to come through and I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to keep moving it. So every couple strokes, because I'll, mess up this paper towel. And I'm going to be looking for these negative shapes. I'm not getting into the detail. I'm looking for the big shapes. And for those of you who are a little too shy to ask, yes, this is how I paint in plein air a lot of the time. And you'll see why. We should have maybe started a timer. But very quickly,
Oh my God, look at that.
very quickly, I can get some big shapes. And I'm just looking for the big shapes. I'm no detail at this stage. But look at that. Already, there's some personality in there. Whether or not I, retain these odd marks this paper towel's making or not, I mean, I already kind of like it. It's there, this shape's not right, this shape's not right, but it's got something, and you can see this gradation in value already from the lights to the darks, where I brought in the different colors. I know that this painting is going to be side lit a little more, not just backlit like I typically do. So let's invite some of that in. So this side of the tree is going to be a little lighter. This side of the tree is going to be a little lighter. Side of the tree is a little lighter. I've also got light coming across the background. So let's use this to kind of carve out. I've got some light back there. I've got some light in the foreground. Sorry if you can hear my phone ringing. I'm ignoring it. And I know it's very glary because I'm doing horizontal strokes. And in this, we've got kind of a boring foreground. We do have a dirt road kind of going in there, but I love the light hitting the tops of these. So I want to use that. But I'm thinking, you know what, this is a little bit boring just to have this big. Let me brush that out real quick so you can actually see what's going on here.
Wow.
So you kind of have the light raking across here, hitting maybe over here, kind of the shadow of this tree going across to these trees. But what I want to do to make that a little more interesting is I'm going to do what I always do, or what I love to do. Anybody want to guess?
Mess it up.
Mess. Yeah. I love that.
Just scream, stop,
What do I love to put in my foregrounds and paintings?
up,
Grass?
no, a little water, bed of water.
There you go. You nailed it. So let's pretend there's a little creek. I just find it to make it a lot of times. Again, my favorite places almost always have water. Ta-da!
There
Perfect.
it is.
No fair. What is your-
It's a happy little creek.
It is a happy little creek.
Look, two strokes with his hand on paper.
My big fat fingers.
Looks like water though. You haven't even made it. I don't know. It's just perfect.
So looking at the angles, all right, they're flatter than a lot of us want to put in. This one could even be a little flatter. I can decide if my creek goes all the way back here or if that's actually some ground. But what again, right now I'm just looking for my big shapes, right? But you can already see like detail will come, right? Like the detail will begin to reveal itself. Nyla, have you ever painted like this before? We lost Nyla. She's sleeping.
Sorry, I was muted. I have
No,
tried.
of course. I was just asking, have you done this wiping away method at all ever?
I have tried, and I like the freedom that it gives you.
Does make for some messy hands.
Yeah.
So now I already know like my shapes are slightly different than in here. So I can decide, would I like them to be more like this, or am I getting the big, the main shapes okay, and I'm going to be happy with some of the alterations. What I really like about this is nothing's locked in. I can, everything's very mobile. I can change, I can edit, I can add, I can subtract. It's very much like the sculpting of painting. Now let's begin to look for some of our bigger negative shapes as we're beginning to carve these out a little bit. So again, I'm constantly putting my finger into the paper towel, or I can, when I want to get to smaller shapes, I just twist a little tip. And then I'll show you the next trick, which a lot of my students already know when I want to get small. And I'm just kind of looking for the motion, the movement of these trees. Some of them are rounder, some of them are more upright, some of them are more jagged, some of them are softer edged.
And so your light source is going to be about a third of the way in on the left?
Yeah, kind of a little bit, not completely side view, but almost side view, a little bit in front.
Okay.
I'm gonna look for my biggest negative shapes or sky hole shapes. But I know that I got a big fat finger. This is not a very big painting, so I'm not gonna try to get too fancy. One other trick that I've learned when doing this is not to worry too much about the little trunks. If I do, I try to make all these little tiny shapes, and I find that they can get a little tough on me. So I just try to ignore the trunks. That I can bring those back in if they're really thin and spindly. And you can already see, like, I did not mean to make this mark. That's just the paper towel. So it's kind of important that maybe I hold it in my hand. It definitely will make marks. Sometimes they're nice and surprising, but oftentimes, more often what happens is I'll drag a little bit of dirty paint and then all of a sudden start making all these marks, you know, where it's touching and they don't mean for it to. So, you know, a lot of people will rip their paper towel in half so it's not so big, a little easier to control. And I'm still just, I don't think like, okay, I've got my big shapes and now let's do the detail. I like to think of it more like the Polaroid picture, you know, the old one you had to shake, and it slowly starts to appear. Again, the detail will come. It just starts to appear, go from bigger shapes to smaller shapes to smaller shapes to smaller shapes. Brush that out. Again, all those horizontal lines. I just have so much fun doing this. And I like that it's like I have an idea of these tree shapes, but I love kind of like being surprised. And sometimes, oh, nope, that's not what I'm after. And other times, like, yeah, that's more organic. That's more interesting. That, you know, is doing something that I maybe wouldn't have done. I like this organic kind of, it invites those happy accidents. It invites me to be a little more open, but I can still go back and change it. Like if I accidentally chop a tree in half that doesn't need to be chopped in half, I can just add a little more paint back into that section. And watch your pressure. So, you know, if I push down hard versus push down soft versus, you know, pick a new clean spot with my paper towels versus let the paper towel hit a couple times and start to get a little dirtier, it makes completely different motions and marks. Like there's times I can actually use the dirty paper towel to even paint with a little bit. Still just looking for big shapes. Something to be mindful of is negative and positive shapes. Have you guys all heard those terms before?
Yes.
So then, you know, I'm thinking right now about the negative shapes as I'm coming in and removing things. So it's like, what is not the trees? What is not the grasses? Or I can be thinking, what is not the dark and what is the light, right? And I want it to be logical. If I've got like a trunk going up and then all of a sudden I put a sky hole where that trunk should be growing through and I don't come back in and put that trunk back in, right? It looks really weird. It looks awkward, like the top of the tree is just kind of floating around in there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put in a little bit of a cloud kind of in here, even though the sky is very bright. I'm going to see if I can't reveal a little bit of an even brighter, lighter, kind of the white of the clouds kind of behind it. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I just put a little bit of paint thinner onto my paper towel, a little bit. I don't want it to be dripping down because that can really cause some catastrophes. The paint thinner, you know, I'm still using a very dirty part of my towel, but I know that the paint thinner is still on there. And I know that it's loosening up that paint underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on there a little bit, let it sit for just a second. It doesn't take long. And then I'll come back in with clean parts of my towel, which this one has very little of. And I will just wipe that again. And all of a sudden the paint just comes right off.
Wow.
So now we should have, yeah, very bright, very light. And again, still thinking big shapes. I'm not too, even though some detail begins to feel like it's sort of appearing in there, I'm not thinking detail at this. I'm just thinking the structure, the underlying structure, the underlying form. So many beginning painters would already be like, okay, time to get to the leaves, time to get to the grasses. But if I just keep thinking big shapes, small shapes, dark shapes, light shapes, warm shapes, cool shapes, the detail, say it with me now, welcome. A lot of times I will, you know, get this a little further along than it is now, and I'll actually let it sit and dry. And then it's really easy and fun to come across and, you know, add the color, add the, you know, if I want different details or different temperature shifts. And sometimes I will, you know, if I'm lucky, I can almost leave it as it is. Called those my illuminated tone series. That was actually Michelle in the class who was telling me that she actually liked this stage, or not this stage, but a little further along so much that she thought I should start leaving some of them. And she wasn't wrong. I've sold almost every single one of those that I've done. So there's something in the freshness and in the energy and in the exploration that people have responded to. And I wasn't brave enough to leave them at what I thought was just the kind of beginning stage of these paintings. To make our light coming through it a little bit stronger. Yeah, that glare is just so crazy looking. So it's almost like a no tan. If you guys remember that term that we talked about, meaning
Mhm.
black and white, it's almost just like two values with slight gradations in the value and temperature. And you guys can see how that could be a pretty useful roadmap, right? As I move forward and begin to build up the trees and the detail. Not fun?
Yes.
Sure is. Thanks.
It's cool to watch you.
I have to ask you one personal question. Does your daughter think you're a dork?
Oh yeah.
Okay, just
Especially
wondering.
especially when I do what I just did to you guys. I'm all the time. I'm like, how you doing, honey? I'm fine, Dad. Thanks for asking. Because she's got her headphones on, so I just talk for her.
It's funny.
Love you. You're the best.
If she wasn't embarrassed, he wouldn't be doing it right.
No, exactly. No, we get along really well, but of course, yeah. She's constantly telling I lose my speaking privileges.
Ah,
So she thinks I always am saying the wrong thing or inappropriate.
Well, it's her job to be embarrassed. She's your daughter, right?
That's exactly right. And it's my job to embarrass her. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be a dad if you didn't do that sometimes.
Yep. Brings me great joy.
That's wonderful.
Now you could stop right now. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. And I may in just a little bit, just because we're already a half hour over time and I do have an appointment coming up I got to get ready for. But yeah, this is fun. I've got the shadow of these trees or the reflections of these trees. So I'll bring that down a little bit, maybe pop this off a little bit so I can get into that little bright spot there. Where did we get? So it wasn't so glary right there. All right, move the camera down, see if that. So the camera needs to look down a little bit, evidently, until I get these lights figured out. You can see the lighter part in the sky. So I could either do it now or once it dries a little bit, I can bring in some cooler colors. I could bring in some darks along the sides of the shadow sides of these bushes. And I can decide, how much of that is important, how much of that, am I telling well enough just by using these simple transitions.
Michael, do you ever get partway into one of these and then it totally looks like something else and you go with that?
Like Mickey Mouse or something, or what do you mean?
No, I mean, like at first it looked like there were going to be mountains in the back and something else. And
Yeah. I try to be open to, as St. Bob Ross says, the happy accidents and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, so I'm open to it, but at the same time, does that mean I need to go find other references and, Does it change the thing that attracted to me to this image? You know, so I gotta be kind of, you know, I'm open, but I'm not too flighty with it.
Michael, would you still put little tiny sky holes like in the body of the trees? In the
Yeah,
body?
so I keep thinking I'm gonna get to that, and now I'm doing it with the little twisted paper towel, so I'm getting littler, and then you guys know the next tool is my Q-tips. So let's just go ahead and jump to that. So I have a jar of Q-tips, and I've got multiple types in here. I've got ones that are very sharp and pointy, I think for makeup or cleaning guns, I guess. I don't own a gun, but and then just the normal ones. I find the dollar store Q-tips to be better. There's times when the, you know, good, you know, expensive fluffy ones are great for big areas, but I find that they don't do very well in the little areas. So here, let's just kind of zoom in for a second here. I'm going to move the camera, so hopefully I don't make you motion sick. And we're going to look you can see how loose it is still, right?
Mhm.
So now I can, with my Q-tip, I can begin to carve out maybe a little finer shapes. Like let's say we want this creek to kind of come over here. So I'm looking at where the light kind of comes through.
Wow, that just makes things so easy. Is he working on that new board too? Are you on a gesso board?
It's just a birch panel that I put gesso onto.
Okay.
And the good thing is I can change my mind. If I'm like, yeah, that's opening it up too much. It's too much water. You know what? Let's close that and have less,
Good idea.
little smaller, a little less pronounced. And that's what I like about this. It's again, it's like carving with clay or sculpting with clay. So it's very mobile, I can add it, I can subtract it. The bad thing about Q-tips, and something to remember if you're like, oh man, I never knew about Q-tips, that's a secret weapon, is that the Q-tips only make one mark.
Oh,
You've got to be aware of that you're just making a Q-tip mark over and over and over. So it's imperative that I come through with some sort of a brush or some other thing to diversify that mark making eventually. So I oftentimes just kind of come through with like a loose, soft brush and just make sure that the marks aren't repetitive. Otherwise, I find that the Q-tips make what I kind of think of as like when you see like an old log and it's had termites or worms or whatever, and it's just all the tunnels are the same width and the same shape. It has that look. It's kind of like a worm or something got through there, and it becomes very redundant and very repetitive. And so all right, so let's get into somewhere like in here where I can show you a little more detail. So I want it to be bright, but not as bright as back here. Sky holes are rarely as light as the lightest part of the sky. I'm going to come through. I'm not going to use a huge amount of pressure. Kind of thinking, where's my trunks? Possibly if I want to. Where's the, you know, if the trunks are there, where might the leaves be? I can come along the edges and make them a little more interesting. Almost again, where's my detail, or detail will come. So the detail starts to appear now, the smaller detail. So all of a sudden, these big, thick tree masses that I have are getting thinner, more transparent. Trying to use dirty Q-tips. Again, knowing that I'll come back in and rough this up a little bit with a brush. These are definitely not the final marks, but I sure do have fun with the Q-tips, coming through and kind of revealing things. This time I'll grab a handful of them so I don't keep trying to use a dirty one. So I'm almost like defining some of the lights and darks to myself. Like, okay, the light's going to be raking across here. It's hitting the top there. I know it shouldn't be as light as the sky or the water. So I'll come back in and kind of darken these down, but I'm just kind of going, okay, the ground goes here. Maybe there's some bushes along the edges here. Want to make him irregular. So maybe some bushes catching some light over here. The ground is still catching the light over here because it's raking across. I don't maybe want this to be such a strong wall of lights and darks, so maybe we'll lower some areas. Right? Just not that big mass. But I want it to be logical. You know, where are trees? Where are bunches of trees? Where are masses of dark and light? And where is it thinner? Where is it thicker? And I already know that this is bothering all you guys, all these lines I put down here. So I'll come down and soften those up in just a second. I'm thinking, okay, who's catching light? Light's coming across. So it's kind of catching on the tops of some of these grasses, on the tops of some of these bushes. So I talked to some of you guys about, you know, using references maybe a little more, some of you about using them a little less. So I am using a reference, right? It still relates to this, but it's taking on its own personality, which makes it a lot more fun. I'm not just a copying machine. You know, I don't want to recreate a bad photo anyways. I would rather make a nice painting, but I'm using information from that, hopefully to get inspired, to find information that will help me tell the story. Hoping I'm pulling off enough paint to. Let's brush that up. I'm going to clean this soft brush real quick. And let's see if this information begins to look a little more realistic, because right now it looks like neon lines going across there.
Oh, looks all right.
Okay, that's magic.
Isn't it though?
Sounds good.
How those bushes disappear.
So you saw how it was so flat a little bit ago? And just
Yeah.
kind of hinting at where light is coming across. So we've got lights, we've got darks, we've got mid values all of a sudden, hopefully.
Wow.
Again, it takes more than two values. Two values create shape. Three values or four values creates form. A shape is a circle, a form is a sphere. A shape is a square, a form is a cube. So how do I make it look like these bushes or grasses or trees are not just shapes, but they are forms?
Could you repeat that? What you said about the shapes and the cubes and the forms and the,
Yeah, can anybody else?
A shape is a circle. A sphere is a form. A shape is a square or rectangle. A shape is a box or cube.
Form is a box.
Form, yes, I'm sorry.
Nope, you're right. So we start with shapes. And you can end with shapes if that's where you want, but I like to have forms. So these trees are kind of, they started off as shapes when I just removed it. The ground was just a big dark shape and it was almost connected to the trees. Oops. And so now by creating a little separation, lights, darks, mid values a little bit in there. Let me grab a smaller, softer brush or soft brush so I can get rid of some of those Q-tip lines.
You haven't worked on
I'm
the
just-
big tree on the right.
What's that?
Worked on the big tree on the right. Yeah.
You want some shapes in there?
Yeah.
All right.
The one next to it. Sky hole.
Hmm.
I see the shapes in those already. I think they already have form and shape.
They do, but he didn't put his magic touch on it.
My magic eraser. And it's not enough to just dab, sky hole, sky hole, sky hole. You've got to think about, there's often more sky holes towards the periphery, towards the edges, because the leaves are getting thinner. When you're looking at a tree sideways, it's a big mass. You're hardly seeing through it. Maybe you're seeing through little parts of it, but towards the edges, if it's like a pine tree or an oak tree, it has that canopy shape. So there might be kind of a little bit of a canopy of sky hole, like, an inverse, like negative shape. So just observing the positive, the negative. Again, if I just said, here's how you do pine trees, here's how you do oak trees, I think it's just so limited. What happens already with so many students and, so many painters is they're, and I've said this before, they're in the forest or painting a forest off in the distance, and it's made up of 1,132 pine trees. Well, that's fine. I know how to do a pine tree. I've got an air freshener hanging in my car. And all of a sudden they're just doing stamp tool of pine tree, pine tree, pine tree, pine tree. What you want to do, if you want your paintings to be interesting and filled with life and soul, is you want to give each one of these trees a personality. You want to give the grasses some personality, not maybe all of them, but you want to look to what makes them different, what makes them special, right? Not so special that maybe it's totally weird and, odd, but what is different? What is the negative? What is the positive shapes? What is the, and within that, all of a sudden, There's just so much more character, right? None of these trees are repetitions. None of these trees are lollipops. None of these trees are air fresheners. And getting close, I'm just gonna, kind of breaking up some of those marks. So again, that's just not Q-tip, Q-tip, Q-tip mark. I'm just now I can even still pick up some of my paint. Oops, I just loaded this brush up with some paint. Doesn't mean once I start going negative, once I start subtracting the paint, that's all I can do. No, I can come back in and add more paint where maybe I took off too much, or maybe I want this tree to be not exactly the same height as that tree. So let's, or maybe I want to push its canopy shape a little more, so it's even more separated.
So then if there's a blue sky behind that tree,
Who what?
if there's a blue sky behind that tree,
Yep.
do you just like go into every sky hole?
Yeah. I mean, in theory, yeah, I probably wouldn't be going into this much detail, but I would just be looking for my big shapes. I use this as kind of more the, my big forms, and maybe I wouldn't get so colorful with it. Maybe I just do black and white, or I could do blue and white, or whatever I wanted. So yeah, that's where, making your underpainting too refined, too beautiful can really be a hindrance. So yeah, as I'm experimenting with these more, I'll either stop earlier so it's not so, refined, because I don't want to just be coloring in the lines.
So if this painting were more about, because it's about the trees,
Yeah.
so that's, but if it were about the sky and the trees, then would you put the sky in and then the trees and then some more of the sky?
I've not really done that. I was reading about like some teachers who teach that way. I don't like to think things too much. I find that gets in my way. So it's more just shapes.
I'm just thinking of how to make the.
That's a good question, because that was my my same question. I know that he doesn't paint his sky before he paints his trees, which is something I would do. But
which makes sense, yeah.
Someone he and I both know made a statement that you should never paint in the trunk before you paint in the top. And I'm just wondering what Michael would do.
That's our question. What would
Again,
Michael do?
I'm thinking about that painting of yours that I was looking to do.
Yeah, I probably had some of like maybe the, the warm colors underneath it. Like I'm thinking that had the pinks as kind of a stained canvas.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, if I can remember correctly. So yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to painting some, especially because right now the sky is literally kind of a yellowy gold color. So yes, I suppose I did kind of get some of that color in. But I would like to have some maybe gray cool to make this feel even warmer. Yeah. So, but the problem, I mean, if you did paint the sky, just make sure you preserve some of that color, because you're going to want to come back in and do, sky holes with that sky color. It might just be a little bit darker, a little bit duller than the bright part of the sky.
Well, that's what Carlson says, that there's no side light coming. When you have a sky hole, there's no light coming from the side in that hole.
Right.
So that it's almost brighter. That's right, brighter isn't the right word, but it's more, a little bit more intense than where there's a whole lot of side light coming.
Yeah, I would have to think on that one. Not that I want to argue with John F. Carlson, but so two things. I'm just gonna take, I've got this dirty brush because I've been using it to kind of brush out these sky holes. The little wormholes that I made from the Q-tips. So now that the brush is dirty, you can take it and I'm just going to bring in and hopefully hint at a trunk. And with those Q-tips, I already did quite a bit. So let's grab one of my little Q-tips and let's see where maybe I can make a little brighter of a trunk here. Maybe kind of coming down. Maybe down here. Just trying to see which trunks maybe are catching light as it's coming across. It's not many of them. Most of them are kind of in shadow. Yeah, and even that's like too strong and too perfect. So I'd probably just take my little brush and
That's cool, Michael.
just not quite so clean. Perfect, obvious marks, will kind of bother me sometimes. And I know that, even though there's a nice big strong trunk there, there's probably some leaves coming across in front of it at, different areas. Always freaks me out when people just all of a sudden draw a line up for the whole trunk. It's like, does that mean all the leaves are on the sides and the back and for some reason not on the front of this tree? That's amazing. Open up in here just a touch. Mostly so I can put a trunk in.
One of the things that absolutely fascinates me about your style is that I'm looking at a painting where you used what, 2 colors
Yeah, I mean, in theory, 3.
or 3 color and look at it. It just blows me away.
Right. And so, yeah, it's so fun that it could be, it could be just a little tonalist painting. It could be, it could be just an underpainting. I can sit with it for a day or two and say, I love you. You're perfect. You're my favorite child. Don't tell my daughter. Or I can be just like, I wish you were never born and scrap it. Or I could say, you know what? You're good. You've got potential. And I'm going to add color or add more paint or whatever that is. And a lot of times there's certain days, and there's some of my most fun days, is I'll do like 3 or 4 of these, right? And then set them aside because they'll dry fast. These will be ready to be painted into almost as soon as tomorrow.
You could almost just glaze a really light color, like if you wanted to glaze green.
Some sap green, yeah.
And just make it a hint of color. That would be cool too.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, exactly. I
You
was
did that
surprised
last
the phthalo green didn't really do much. I mean, it made it darker, but and I thought it would be stronger.
It's incognito.
It is. I guess that's kind of what I want.
It'd
But
be
it-
interesting to hold up one of your other paintings that you've done like this, that you did not use the phthalo green. Because you're
Yeah,
right, I don't see any difference at all.
Well,
I don't see any green.
I think what it did was where he wants it dark and he's leaving it darker, and that phthalo green made those spots, that lower edge
Yeah.
darker.
Made the
Lower.
darker dark.
The lower left, yeah.
But I would think that the raw umber would have done the same.
yeah, so this one has a lot more red in it.
Hmm.
Man, sorry about that glare. That is chaos. I even put like special anti-glare screens over the filters or over the lights.
Like a diffuser.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's got a mesh and and they were supposed to have a diffuser, but for whatever reason, they sure show up on camera.
I'm just thinking, I just taped some bubble wrap up there.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of what I did. It's not, I put the diffuser fabric like photographers would use. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there, but did that make sense? The breakdown from big shapes to small shapes? You don't have to do it in a
Yes.
with method at all. That was just an example. You could do it, you know, drawing out the big shapes, but you let the detail come. You don't have to draw every little darn leaf in the beginning. The detail will come, and I could continue to detail this. I could grab little brushes, I could do individual grasses, I could do, you know, all the different things I want to do. I can make it as detailed or as loose or as gestural or as, you know, photographic as I want. Questions?
I love it like it is.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Very
I
cool.
think the one thing that I learned about using that, I guess, limited wipe away, because you're controlling it. You're not doing it like Stuart Davies does it. And I really like the organic accidents, if you will, the way that you get the different tones, and it
Right?
just like it takes on a very organic, very natural feel.
Yes, good. Like, I mean, there was times where I was like, oh, there wasn't gonna be a bush there, but hey, that looks all right.
Exactly.
Welcome to the
Exactly.
family, bush.
Yep, exactly. And they just kind of, they're all little happy accidents, I guess, Bob Ross. But that's one thing that I learned doing the wipe away is you get some very organic shapes that are just like, oh, you know, and then you just need to add a little touch of paint too. And all of a sudden you've got a beautiful form or a beautiful shape.
Yeah, and the biggest part is basically if you look from the top of the trees where they're the lightest, right? That's where they're the thinnest. The leaves are catching the most light, and then they get thicker. You know, the one on the left, I'll probably come in and add more darks into it. It looks like it gets a little too thin. But anyways, watch that gradation goes from light to mid, then it comes down to mid again, where the background trees are thin. And then it goes into the darks, then it goes back into the mid, then it goes to the darks, then it goes to the mid or the lights on the tops of the grasses, and then back to the shadows. So that's what's giving us this idea. I never once painted grass. I never once painted trees. I can come back and, you know, add all the information I want. But I want you to think big shapes to small shapes. The detail will come. That is the lesson for today. So play with brush strokes. Have just an extra, you know, it could be on a piece of paper, right? It doesn't have to be anything. Just experiment with pushing your brush down and then slowly picking it up. Think the brush stroke has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Donna Sires, I saw you yawning, so you get extra homework. Donna gets to, and all of you guys, with a big flat, experiment with putting two colors on it. One color on the left side of the brush and dipping it on the right side, and then doing a brush stroke. And then if that feels fun, because you get these really beautiful swirls, look to Anton Pavlenko, look to a lot of the Russian painters. They do these beautiful swirls of color in one single brush stroke. They don't they don't mix their piles completely.
I once asked a teacher why they didn't double load the brush if they were going to put both those colors in there. And they said, we don't do that.
We're Americans, damn it, Cheryl, come on.
Yeah.
No, we should do that because it's amazing. It's a difficult thing, but when I'm doing those 30 brushstroke paintings as a challenge, I do triple dips, where I'll dip the whole brush in one color and then I'll dip each corner into a brush into a color, so that I know as the paint's coming off, I'm already thinking ahead to where is this brushstroke going to go? How much area do I want to cover it? You know, and like I could do a cloud with a top lit cloud and a bottom shadow all in one brushstroke.
Oh, God.
Show off.
Next week I'll show off or
Okay.
embarrass myself completely, which I just as like to do. But yeah, Linda, you pick a nice loose one of your those that you want me to do, and I'll do a 30-stroke painting of one of your photos next week.
Oh, okay. I'll meet that challenge.
I bet you will.
Cool.
All right, you guys, any questions? The main thing, the main thing is to find your next picture. What is it you want to do? And if you want to start it, get a little jump, because the truth is, a lot of times people don't finish it till the end of class, and then I can't really help you too much. So the further you get along, the more I can help you, the more the class can help you. So yeah, if you would, you know, if you're like, yeah, I'll do a little bit of experimenting with brushworks, maybe I'll do a little bit of this, or maybe I'll even do this, what I just showed you, as my underpainting to the painting going forward, then at least you're moving forward. Because even though we have 2 more weeks, it goes fast. And again, the after that, I always promise that I'll give you guys feedback, but I never hardly do. I'm already off to the next class. It starts immediately afterwards.
Okay.
Great. Questions?
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
You guys are awesome. I'm so proud of all of you. You guys are doing great work. I really do appreciate you guys challenging yourselves, trying new things, letting yourselves be uncomfortable, being willing to take risks, make mistakes, and learning from them.
Is there a way to paint without doing all those things?
Yeah.
What's that?
I'd like to know.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but
Thank you.
I'm having a hard time understanding, sorry.
sorry.
Thank you.
Hey, are you doing tomorrow, Michael?
Yep, I'll be here. I
Okay.
think I'll be painting on some ladies with flowy outfits tomorrow.
Oh, cool.
Can't wait to
Oh,
see
that's
that.
right. You started those last week.
Yeah, and then I wiped it off. I've wiped it off twice.
What you did last week, you wiped it all away?
With the flowy,
Yeah.
wasn't that just the acrylic underpainting? That's still there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I colored it and I experimented with really big, thick brush strokes, and it just got out of hand, and I wasn't making the right colors. I experimented also with that palette that I challenged Linda to do, and that you guys did, and I just wasn't getting the mood or the effect that I had wanted. So I had to decide, do I just keep going with the new thing, or do I go back to what I was hoping to get? So I decided to go back. So anyways,
Can't wait to see it.
it's a mess right now. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow morning at 9. I will hopefully have these videos downloaded hopefully this afternoon, but again, I have an appointment here in an hour. Yeah, we'll see what's going on. So if not, tomorrow morning around by 10 o'clock PST, you should have the recordings if you actually care to see any of this again.
Always.
All right, you guys are fantastic. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Cheryl,
Thank you.
Diane,
Bye.
Christine,
Happy Easter, everybody.
you guys are all amazing.
Bye.
Easter,
Bye,
yeah.
Lisa. Bye,
Sure
Donna.
to
Bye,
tell me
Gail.
you guys.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.